Thank you, panellists. It's a pretty hard act to follow. But actually, those children are absolutely right. They are the future. They're starting off on the right foot. They're putting thought and words into action, and that's partly what we're here for today. So, yeah, really pleased to follow on from that. I think Katie and the team have been quite brave giving me a microphone. I will attempt not to use it as my own soapbox and platform, unlike Simon. But I'm sure I will occasionally. And I wasn't actually going to start off with now how I'm going to start off, but following those children, they for me, as Wales manager for Social Farms and Gardens, we are about a movement, we're about a membership, and we're about connecting people up at that sort of grassroots level. But what we're trying to do in this panel session is to look at how we can amplify, to accelerate, to showcase, to really champion that level of activity out there. And as an organisation in Wales, we've got 330 odd members, but more importantly, we've got over 1,000 community food growing sites across Wales. That's pretty much one in every single community, which is amazing. And actually, if you amalgamate all of that land together, it is almost equivalent, and Amber will pull me up slightly on this one, almost equivalent to the commercial scale of horticulture activity in Wales at the community level. So in terms of output, it has potential to really deliver and support our localised, more sustainable food systems. Okay, so that's my little bit of soapbox. Not rant, but outputs. We're here to talk a little bit about what goes on the ground, how that's backed up, and how that could and should and does influence policy. And food is a part of all of us. Can't get away from that. We all eat food, so therefore, as others have said, we're in it. If you eat food, you're in it, as Pam Warhurst would say. But policy is shifting. And in relative terms, and I look at some of Welsh Government colleagues here and ministers, it's shifting quite fast. Governments don't shift that fast, but in some cases it shifts reasonably fast. And we as organisations and partners in the organisations that we work with have to try and be able to react to that and to help at the point of policy being drafted by somebody with a pen or a keyboard these days in an office that might not have all of the skill sets. And that's nothing against those teams that have that really hard job of working out what policy might look like and how you put it into context, how you consult on it, and then how you deliver it. That's a really tricky game. But what I see one of our key roles in doing is showcasing, with the expertise that's here in the room and out there on the ground, what good policy can look like and what it can deliver and the change it can make. So I guess, Simon, where have you gone? Try not to use Simon's words of lobbying. We amplify, we advocate. If we lobby, that hinders us a bit, if I'm honest, in Wales, because we don't want to be seen as lobbyists. We want to be seen as a supportive conversation place, somebody that has that ability to make the connections and the bridges between the real activity on the ground, the skill sets that are out there, the academic research that's backing it up, and how we can then start to join the dots up and influence some of that policy. I've said it's busy in terms of policy. It is really busy, and it's really busy at every level. It's busy in Scottish Government, it's busy in Westminster, it's busy in Welsh Government, but actually at the levels below that, it's really busy as well. Local authorities, 22 in Wales, all having different priorities, different ways of working, perhaps. Mike, where's Mike Thorogood? What are we at? 700 plus town and community councils in Wales? That's a lot. And each of those has a different strategy, different way of working, different priorities. But incidental quick coffee conversations, I know more town and community councils are delivering place plans. They're delivering decarbonisation strategies. They're delivering against their climate emergency and declarations at that very lowest level of local authority, which is fantastic. So you've got to work out how you find your space across all of that activity and where you can put your limited effort and resources in. Some of the stuff that's come across our desks just in the last, let's say, few weeks, stroke months alone, and I'll have to read a few of these out. Sustainable land management, obviously CAP reform's been out there for a little while. It's doing its thing, it's coming out. We'll hear a bit more at the Royal Welsh in a few weeks' time. But that's quite consuming. It's quite consuming for farmers, how they engage with that. It's quite consuming as us, as third sector organisations. And it's really hard for the people on the ground that are out there doing it, growing it, living it, to work out how they would even dream of feeding into some of that policy shift. Food Bill Wales, Peter Fox and his team here, working really hard behind the scenes to deliver, I think it's the second only private members bill coming through the Cynhadledd. That's a tough game, and a very short space of time. And I don't know if we're allowed to say more about where we're at timeframes with that, Tyler, or not, or Peter?
We can do, hopefully everyone can hear me. So we currently have a draft bill. So we will be launching a consultation on the draft bill at the Vale show. So we've lined up... thank you, Katie.
Sorry.
Hopefully everyone can hear me now. That's a bit weird, hearing myself. So yes, as I was saying, we are launching a consultation at the Rolwell show. So Peter will be front and centre of that. We're meeting a range of stakeholders, but also, more importantly, we are trying to meet as many members of the public to raise awareness of the bill, what it's trying to do, and how they can feed into that process. So there will be a consultation document. They'll be available online. I think we're going to have some paper copies of these as well. So over the summer, the consultation will be open. And then we'll go back as the bill team, look at those responses, and then feed those into the final drafting process. And the bill then will be laid before the Senedd formally by December. And then they'll kickstart the normal process. So very, very close, and a lot of work going on behind the scenes on that.
Yeah, and to be commended, and the ability of others to try and feed into that pre-process. Look forward to seeing the draft coming out publicly, and then we've all got a responsibility to try and feed back our, I was going to say concerns, I'm not going to say concerns, the opportunities that it can deliver for a better food system in Wales. So, yeah, well done. But there's many more. Community food strategy. That's a developing, emerging space at the moment. We might hear more soon. I'm not going to put David on the spot, but we might hear more soon during the summer around what a community food strategy for Wales might look like, and hopefully how that improves on what England have now got in their national food strategy. Let's see what we might be able to work within a framework for Wales and their community food strategy. We've got food and environment consultation just being launched now around how our interplay with food really makes a difference on our behaviour and on the environment that we face out there in our everyday lives. There's a consultation from Welsh Government looking at how that affects us all. I'm going to run through these quickly. Clean Air Act. You might not think it all relates back to food, but actually if we manage our soils better, and we've talked about it already, nurturing our soils, we improve the air quality and our local environment health as well. Net zero plans and strategies coming out of local authorities, those decarbonisation plans. We've got a national strategy from Welsh Government. Huge piece of work. We've got legislated targets in Wales to deliver against net zero. That's ambitious for a government to set targets that it's going to be hard to reach. And then we've got local authorities and health boards and all the other public bodies trying to work out how they help deliver those. So there's a team in Welsh Government that have set a strategy to deliver those net zero targets, if you like. But that's going to have to involve people and communities to deliver. It can't come from top-down institutions. It has to come both ways. Talked about decarbonisation plans, wellbeing assessments, local authority, health boards, looking at wellbeing assessments across the whole of Wales, a lot of data flowing around those. We have to make sure people fill those assessments in for the right data to be used to assess what's going on. And then, as we said, at that lower level, place plans emerging from town and community councils, really working out how their communities benefit from what's around them, their environments, and how it can unlock development, how it can unlock land, how it can promote sustainable development, all of those sorts of things happening. Loads of it, and we know that. And I guess as those second-tier organisations, we have to work out how our very limited resources try and influence and best champion what goes out there on the ground. So I'm going to introduce the panellists relatively quickly. And in no particular order, pick on Abel. We're a firm believer in social farms and gardens as seeing is believing. It's that simple philosophy, show me and I understand. Talk to me, tell me, preach to me. My okay, I might get some of it, but I'm not going to get it as much as going out. And I've been to Glasbren a couple of times, and every time I come away with that, wow, this is what we need to do. And Abel's there doing it. And Abel collared me earlier and said, did you read my bio? And I was like, Abel, sorry, I haven't. So I'm going to say, Abel, to me, is a friend, but actually he's a supporter and a friend to many. He's a farmer, he's a grower, he's a soil guardian, and he's a trainer. He's an imparter of his knowledge and his skills on others, all through the medium of food, land, and what Glasbren is all about. And Abel and Angelina are going to do a bit of a double act, promoting a joint project that they've been working on, and highlight some of the summaries from that, what it's achieved, how it worked. And I've got a few buts in here. We have to back up what we sort of know is right and good with the academic research. We know that if we push a policy change or something and it's not backed up by evidence, it doesn't get very far, or it's harder to make your voice heard. So Angelina's here. And Angelina, I'm going to say Angelina is Professor of Food Strategy Systems with UWE, but formerly of Cardiff University. Still very much based in Wales. A really good friend to have when you're out there doing stuff on the ground, but you need it backed up. Amber in the audience. Again, we're able to back up what we sort of know is right in the main with that academic research that's really needed and valued. Particularly when you look for money and things like that, you've got to have, what are the opportunities? Have we tested it? What are the issues? And academic research and the teams within the academic institutions in Wales and just across the border really help with that. Another but we can't do all of that on our own. Those that know me know I'm sort of new to politics. I know David a few years ago said to me, we'll make a good civil servant out of you one day. But I've gone the other way, David. I know. But in my local authority that I support, stroke champion, stroke challenge, 1 in 11 people in my local authority are employed by the local authority. It is a ginormous institution, and finding your way in through that institution to the right people to speak to is almost impossible. It's pretty impossible from the inside, particularly as a new councillor, but I will get there. And what we need is we need champions from the inside of those organisations and those institutions. So I'm looking at both, well, Emma and Chris here, but I'm going to say that there's a linking back to sustainable food places that we're here for. Without the officers directly embedded in those partnerships, and in some cases directly embedded within the local authorities, what we're trying to achieve here today and beyond this project and previously would be really hard without that direct connection. So Chris is going to show us a video actually and chat through some of that work. And then obviously we're not just talking about local authorities at all. We've talked about health and all the other issues around us, and that's where our health boards and our key contacts within the health boards come in, and Emma's going to give us a chance to talk about some of that. So trying to show you a picture of activity out there on the ground, support from sort of third sector type organisations, needing those partnerships, absolutely needing that academic research to back it all up and to hopefully prove some of the systems change. So I'm going to hand over to a double act of Angelina and Abel, and I'll leave it to you to work out how you're beginning that. Thank you.
Okay. I was wondering how that was going to work. Okay. No. Did I hit the wrong one?
Yeah, that one, I think, turns it off.
Oh, sorry.
That's on the right.
Okay.
No worries.
I'm glad that wasn't me.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Accessible Veg Project. But before I do, I'll talk about the precursor to Accessible Veg, which was our tea grains project. And that was a project that ran from 2019 until this last September 2021. And in that project, really looking at what happens when you build relationships back into the food system. do you get healthier and more sustainable diets as an outcome? And in order to measure that, we looked at we recruited participants who had newly joined a CSA veg bag scheme, and then we tracked them for a 3-year period, looking at changes in their diet and changes in their attitudes and behaviors around food. And one of the things we found was that, yes, their diets did change. They were eating more vegetables, less meat, less fat, less sugar, and more legumes. So they're really moving towards the kind of sustainable diets that we need to see if we're going to reach net zero emission targets. So one of the big questions, though, that came out of that was, well, these are people who've joined a veg bag scheme, and we know that that is a white middle-class phenomenon. And so what we really wanted to see was, how can we extend these benefits to the wider population in the UK? So the Accessible Veg Project came about, and we worked with 4 CSAs, including Abel CSA at Glasbren, and we recruited food insecure households to participate across those 4 CSAs, and they joined the CSA membership and received veg bags for the whole harvest period. So typically sometime July till about end of November, December time. We interviewed them before they started receiving veg bags. We interviewed them at the end of the harvest season, and then analyzed that data. So yeah, and then in March, we ran a workshop with our CSA partners. Another key part that I didn't mention was that what we tried to do was encourage the CSA farms to partner up with a local food aid charity. And that wasn't always possible. We had 2 really good partnerships. So we worked with 4 farms. 2 had really good partnerships. 1 was a so-so partnership, and the 4th one couldn't find a local food aid partner to work with. I should have gone to this. Sorry, I didn't hit that button. But basically just shows we're looking at what were the barriers and what were the impacts of a CSA membership for food insecure households specifically. And then another part of the project actually was to work with the CSAs to explore ways that they could introduce a solidarity model. So in the 1-year period, we, through research funds, covered the cost of the veg bags. But the idea was that gave the CSAs an opportunity to try out different mechanisms for introducing a solidarity model to generate the funds to cover the veg bags going forward beyond the project lifetime, so that then it would be a sustainable solidarity model that existed outside of the research funding. So what we found in terms of barriers to participation, I don't think it's much of a surprise, but it was through the interviews looking at, lack of information, knowledge, and confidence about using vegetables. So I think receiving these veg bags enabled families to try out different things and to try it without necessarily that fear of, if this doesn't go well, actually we're not going to be able to eat, sort of thing. And then there is often the sentiment also expressed, well, if I get these veg and my kids don't like it, I can't afford to buy food that my kids aren't going to eat. So it enabled families to do a bit of experimentation, try things out. But if we go down to the last one about the multi-layered mental health problems and other issues, one of the downsides of it was that additional stress of, how do I cook this? What do I do with this? I mean, I deal every day when my husband says, what should we eat tonight? I feel overwhelmed by that question. I can't think. I go in paralysis. What are we going to eat tonight? And this happens daily. And so if you can imagine, on top of that, experiencing physical and mental health issues, it becomes a really significant challenge to overcome in some cases. And that is what we find often in food insecure households experiencing poverty. That's a stressful situation to be living in, and they're often experiencing anxiety and depression. Sometimes as a result of it, sometimes it's compounded by it, but it's multi-layered, I think, is the point that we're making here. And then there's a lack of transport to collect the veg bags. So our farm partners really worked well with us on that, and we were able to deliver the veg bags to those households that needed it most. So what we found in terms of food security was that food security improved over the course of the scheme. We measured it according to the measurements that Food Cardiff uses to measure household food insecurity, and you see that there in terms of our numbers. So the numbers aren't high. In terms of our pre and post, we started with 48 households. With those 48, 16 of them also did the post interview. So it was challenging from a research perspective, partially because of the multi-layered challenges that households were facing. This one, though, I thought was really a nice outcome from that. We measured well-being. So we used a very typical well-being scale of, I think it was 14 questions, and we did it before and after, and we saw statistically significant improvements in well-being for those participants in the study. It roughly equates to around a 10% increase, and what we found this related to was around the relationships that were built up. Now, funny enough, 60% of participants didn't actually ever visit the farm, because you would think, well, that's actually where the relationships happen, where they get built, is through that face-to-face contact. 60% never visited the farm, yet over 60% talked about the significance of being a part of that community. So actually being a part of a community happens in many more ways than just that face-to-face. It's the weekly email, it's the newsletter that they get, it might be a printed newsletter in the veg bag, even the drop-off, a 5-10-minute interaction with someone who every week brought them this bag of veg, asked them how they were doing, said hello. It was a highlight for some of our participants. Many of them don't have that regular positive point of contact with someone in their community. So these sort of intangibles actually drove an improvement in the well-being that our participants were experiencing. So yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Abel.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Glasbren first of all, just for those of you that don't know it, and then about our part in the Accessible Veg. So Glasbren is the Welsh language word for sapling, and we are kind of a collective of veg growers, farmers, foragers, food activists, kind of trying to, I suppose we're quite passionate about the role food and small farms like ours and CSAs can play in kind of addressing all of the issues of our time together, so in kind of intersectional way, so whether it's climate change, ecological collapse, food insecurity, mental health and well-being, all of these things can be addressed in a very grassroots local level on farms, we believe. So practically speaking, we feed 50 local families through our CSA veg box scheme. So that's within a 10-mile radius, so it includes Carmarthen, Johnstown, Llangain, Llansteffan, Bancavelin, St Clair's, places like that. And maybe, I'm sure you most are aware of what a CSA is, but essentially, for anyone that hasn't come across it, it's community-supported agriculture, which is a sort of a quite radically different and new model. Well, not so new, but new to us. A way of sort of a model based more on transparency and relationship between producers and consumers, whereby the risks and rewards of farming are shared. Our members become members for the whole season, so they kind of pledge their support up front. A lot of them financially too, so a lot of them will pay their membership for the whole year at a time when we need money for seeds and things like that. And it's kind of, it transforms the whole experience from one of commodity food being something on a shelf in a package that you have no felt relationship to a kind of a participation together, kind of working together. A lot of our members come down and volunteer to help with growing their veg, and it's all about engagement. We put a lot of work into communication and the realities of farming, the way we produce the food, some of the things we're thinking about, recipe ideas, ways of working with the veg. So we also welcome volunteers. We have free workshops throughout the year and kind of resourcing people with skills around regenerative living, sort of self-reliance, resilience. I guess all of our work kind of centers around bringing people into relationship with their place, their land, the people that grow their food, and trying to empower them to kind of feel connected to and experience what it's like to have food as a central part of your life. Which, obviously, as Gary said, that's a lot of the benefits of that are kind of something you can feel in your heart and something you can kind of get your head around, but it's really been great. The last 2-3 years we've worked on a couple of projects that have kind of lended an academic research-based approach to what we're doing and have kind of helped highlight the benefits that we know from our members and what we see, but it's nice to see it on paper in a report that I've just read this morning. So yeah, I suppose it was in March 2020 we started thinking about food security. Obviously we were seeing the empty shelves in the supermarket and everybody struggling with the first lockdowns. And so the first iteration of that was just to start donating veg to the food bank, and we started raising money to kind of support that. And then we started our own Solidarity Veg Box scheme, so that was where our sort of full members would pay extra if they could, that would go into a pot that would then subsidise free or cheap veg boxes for Solidarity members. And then we joined the Accessible Veg Project, which allowed us to add a further 10 participants to our Solidarity model, so they would get free boxes in exchange for their participation in the study. So that ran, I think, from June till November 2021. Yeah, and it was a really educational experience for us. It definitely, in a nutshell, the outcome was that it's not as simple as just taking the cost out of food, making it free. It's so complex in terms of dealing with the people taking part. The people that were really invested and really engaged, I think really took a lot from it in terms of building a sense of community, a sense of being part of something, learning about cooking and ways to work with sometimes unusual veg. But there were a lot of challenges, and I think it's a positive and something that shows the potential of CSAs is that it showed a lot of the barriers to people accessing CSAs and really making the most of them. And Angelina's mentioned a lot of them, but we found particularly around cooking skills and food literacy, just general sense of feeling empowered to work with local, seasonal, very leafy green type vegetables that you don't get in the shops. And also the resources to work with that food. So whether that's mental capacity, whether that's family support, time, all of these things came up that I suppose were potentially unexpected or just sort of broadened the scope of what needs to be addressed if we're going to get this kind of veg, this kind of way of eating, which is it's a very different new way of eating to a wider population and to people experiencing food insecurity. So it brought out a lot of questions and a lot of things we need to work on, and we're working a lot more now on cooking skills, communicating around the food and how people can use it. And I suppose now our model has moved into we now offer all of our veg boxes on a sliding scale, so there's no separate Solidarity model and CSA model. Everybody's a member and they pay what they can within a range, and we're finding that is really working in the sense that people who can will pay at the higher end, people who have lower incomes will pay at the lower end, and it's so far really working out. It's really balancing out, and it takes away the stigma of charity or handouts or all these things that came up from the study, and gives everybody the full benefits of being a full member of a CSA. Nobody knows what anybody's paid, so there's no separation. It's just everybody's paying what's realistic for them. I think that's enough for now.
Thank you, Abel.
So just to say some of the outcomes from the project, we worked with the 4 farms. 2 farms now have gone forward implementing their own solidarity model. And 2 of the farms felt that they needed more support. And what we actually found was one of the critical parts of success with the project was that partnership that the farms had built with their local food aid charity partner. It was funny because it wasn't actually something we thought about as part of the design of the project from the start, but before we started actually talking with some of our farm partners, realized, well, hey, let's bring in someone from the community who is working with food insecure households, because they were asking, well, how are we going to identify food insecure households? And I thought, I don't know. And so we built that in, and those farms who had that partnership in place, those were the ones where we saw the least turnover. those are the ones where the same households who started at the project finished the project. And part of that, I think, is because of the relationships of trust that were already in place between the food aid partner and the food insecure households. And so the farm then didn't have to try and build those relationships in, because it is hard. You need trust in those relationships. These households need to understand, what is this all about? What are people going to want from me out of this, and things like that. So, and actually they help to facilitate the households in terms of what can you cook with it. One food aid charity started a Facebook group just for those households, and they would put up different recipes and ideas of what to do. So the partnership angle was actually really, really critical for the success of the solidarity model and the longevity of it. So we had some key recommendations here, but really the report is on the table, so if you'd like to read more about it, please just pick that up and have a leaf through it. Thanks.
Thank you both. We'll make sure stuff gets shared after today as well, obviously digitally and online, but there are copies there. I'm going to, if it's okay, keep questions towards the end. So if you've got a question, remember it, sort of sit on it for a minute, and we'll try and come back to you towards the end. I'm going to ask Emma to give us a different perspective now from a sort of let's say, a health board or clinician's side from within a authority health board. So Emma, over to you.
Keep going. No, you're okay.
There you go.
Hi everybody. It's really nice to be here face to face. It's really nice to be here face to face. I don't normally need a mic, because for anybody who knows me, I'm quite loud and I don't shut up. So, but it's really lovely to be face to face. One thing that has changed through COVID is that I now need my glasses, which I didn't do before when we started. So I'm Emma Holmes. I'm the clinical lead for public health dietetics for Cardiff and Vale University Health Board, and also fortunate to sit on the steering group for both Food Cardiff and Food Vale. Like Errol, I was there at the very beginning of the Food Cardiff, just starting within this role when we first started out. And I think as a dietitian, where I've been a dietitian for 25 years, I was 5 when I qualified, I think as a health professional within the dietetic profession, this certainly wasn't an area of work where I thought I'd end up working within, but feel really privileged, and listening to everybody speak this morning just increases that passion for me. But the main aim of why I'm here this morning is to discuss our Nutrition Skills for Life programme. Nutrition Skills for Life is an all Wales programme, so no matter where you are within Wales, we have that once for Wales approach. And the aim really for me being this morning is just to give a bit of an overview of the programme, how it runs, and how we can support communities in accessing a sustainable and affordable nutritious diet. I lead a fantastic team of dietitians and support workers within Cardiff and Vale. And like was alluded to this morning, we know that diet-related conditions aren't getting better. Our obesity levels are increasing, and particularly within children, that gap between children living in the most and the least deprived is getting bigger. So linking into the discussions, something needs to change, and I think having dietetics and nutrition as part of the sustainable food places is really beneficial. So our aim is to build community capacity to support health eating and prevent malnutrition. So the programme Nutrition Skills for Life was initially called the Increased Dietetic Capacity Grant Scheme. So as you can see, really rolled off the tongue, but it did what it said on the tin. So back in 2006, through Welsh Government, all health boards received funding to provide public health dietetics as part of their service. And the aim is that people in Wales will have the skills, opportunity and confidence to access healthy, affordable, sustainable food for themselves, their families and their communities. And I think reflecting on the discussions this morning around sort of knowledge and skills, I think what we see on the ground is that people often don't have the knowledge and the skills to be able to feed themselves and their family in a way that they would choose to do. So I think the important thing, I think, from the discussion this morning is we can't assume that people haven't got the skills, but neither can we assume that they have. And it's how best we support that system behind them, like I said this morning. But also, we've got people out there now who need to cook, who need to feed their families. They're often the most creative, particularly those who are on a low budget. They're really creative, but they're fighting against so many other factors within their lives. So the way that we can best support them to make that choice the easy choice, and that easy choice is the healthier choice, is how best I think we can move forward. So the objectives of the programme are to increase the capacity of the community workforce in Wales. So that's by providing accredited nutrition training for staff and communities, and make sure that that training is up to date and evidence-based as well. There are only a limited number of dietitians and support workers. We can't be out to everybody, but also it's working with people who know those communities best. They're often experts within their own lives, and us helicoptering in and telling them what to do often doesn't work. So how can we work with people to actually ensure that food, and I think, Simon, you mentioned this morning about enjoyment and that love of food, and I think that's really important as well, is how can we have that really positive experience of food, and by working with communities themselves, I think that's how we can move that forward. To support the development of healthier environments, so for example, we work with early years settings, we work with nursing homes, older adult settings, to ensure that there's best practice. It fits in with Welsh Government guidelines for the settings, so food and nutrition within childcare settings, and supporting at that policy level as well. Supporting local community food initiatives, and I'll come on to that in a little bit, some examples of what we've done so far, and supporting local partnerships. There is a focus on 0 to 25s and lower socioeconomic groups. The key objective, it does include hard to reach groups, and I really struggle with that sort of definition as well, because I think historically they've been called hard to reach, but that's up to us surely to sort of see how do we engage with those who find it difficult to engage with us. So I do struggle a little bit with that. With regards to the sort of way that the project works within each individual health board, the funding is now within the core health board. So the Nutrition Skills for Life is no longer done as a grant scheme, it is embedded within the core. But it hasn't increased, and our awareness and our knowledge of the importance of food and nutrition continues to increase, both within health, but also with the wider workforce. We can't tackle it on our own in health, it has to be everybody. So we do sort of rely on external funding streams as well. So quite often, for example, within Cardiff and Vale, we're fortunate that we work with Food for Life get-togethers, so that increases capacity on the ground. Other schemes such as Families First, Fly and Start, but each area will be slightly different in where they source their funding from. So there is an overarching for that 0 to 25s, but then what we can do is enable us to access alternative funding then to support other organisations. For example, we now support the homeless population with a specific sort of funding pot within Cardiff and Vale. So what does it look like practically? So it's a suite of units that are accredited through Agored Cymru. There's 3 level 2 courses that are delivered. So there's level 2 community food and nutrition skills, which is what we sort of kind of call our gold standard. So that's an across the board. And that's 3 credits, so that means 30 hours learning. There's also a level 2 course for those who work within early years. So that's more embracing a settings-based approach. And then those then for working with sort of generally older adults, but can also be used for those who are supporters of other client groups, for example, those with learning disabilities. A level 2 for those who sort of aren't sort of more in education field is the equivalent of sort of like a GCSE A to C, so that's at the sort of level that we're working at. All the courses at level 2 are delivered by qualified dietitians, and they are really interactive, fun, activity-based sessions that then the participants who are doing those can use those then to go on and deliver to the communities that they work with. We've also got level 1, so that's sort of GCSE, sort of D and below, and they're sort of more for the communities. So people who've attended the level 2 Community Food and Nutrition Skills course can then go on and deliver these courses with the support of the dietitians within your local health board. So there's Community Food and Nutrition Skills, which is a more theory type based course. Get Cooking, which is a practical cooking course where they deliver, they cook together, they often eat together. Some of it is following recipes, but some of it is more, you look in your cupboard and this is what we got. What can you put together that's a healthy, nutritious meal for you and your family, which I think is really important. And I think really interesting what you were saying, Abel, about those sort of cooking skills, like with different vegetables and things like that. And we've certainly done some work, Katie's there with Fair Share, about some of the veg that comes through Fair Share, isn't it, is right, what can people do with this? So I think we try and incorporate those messages throughout that. Come and Cook is also a sort of mixture of practical cooking and theory-based, but that tends to run in North Wales, whereas Get Cooking is more South Wales. Foodwise for Life is a weight management type course, and also Foodwise in Pregnancy. And Foodwise in Pregnancy is also being launched soon as an app as well that people can access. For those who've done the level 2 and are interested in sort of embedding the level 1 and delivering level 1, we also support facilitation training. And it can also now all be delivered digitally, except with the exception for older adults. So COVID had a benefit in that way, in that it really moved us forward. And as part of the Healthy Wales, Healthy Weight, Healthy Wales strategy, transferring all the nutrition skills for life onto a digital format was part of the plan. It's really successful in some areas, and it's really interactive. It is flipped in the way it's delivered. I think for some, face-to-face contact is still, that peer-to-peer support is really, really important. But I think having that option and having that blended learning is really important and increases our capacity and increases the ability of people to attend the training.
I'm going to have to...
Yep.
Last one.
Last one. So I just thought it'd be really interesting just to sort of show some of the different areas of work where we were linking with. So we've got Food Cardiff, Food Vale. We're really supportive of the alternative food retail project, and we went across to London a couple of weeks ago and presented on our work there. But like I said, one of our objectives is increasing community capacity, and we can only do that in partnership with everyone else. We can't do that on our own. And I think that's what I'd like to leave you with, really, is a picture says 1,000 words, doesn't it? And I think people engaging in food and cooking and enjoying it is really sort of vital for us to sort of move forward with this agenda.
Thank you, Emma. A really vital service that's out there in the background with some really passionate staff doing some amazing support work, to the communities, but also to other organisations. And I know, even in our local area, we've managed to really tap into that resource, that facility, that expertise, and make sure it just can deliver as much as it possibly can within the limited resources that the health boards have. So, thank you. I'm going to ask Chris via a video, and you can decide how this works, but Chris is one of the Sustainable Food Places coordinators, and he's going to sort of give us an overview of what that role might entail and how it hopefully works. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, Gary. Yeah, I think we'll do the video at the end, but I got a few slides to do. I put food leader Chris Nottingham. It's quite a bold statement, but I thought this was my placeholder, but I thought I'll be talking about my food community, and this is one of the things that sort of my food community program like empowered me to sort of identify that this work I'm doing is food leadership, and I might not necessarily have been the best person that sort of recognized that at the time. So yeah, my journey, my epic tale of sustainable food. It begins with me as a chef in a well-respected restaurant, and our most popular dish was the critically endangered European eel, and it was just wrong and driving me mad. And I thought, like, we've got this really apparently knowledgeable customer base. Why isn't anyone like mentioning this? So I did a lot of research and read a lot of books about food systems, sustainable food. Ended up doing a master's in sustainable food at the Centre for Alternative Technology. And then there I developed my interest in sort of food environments and this sort of food inequality and about accessing a sustainable and healthy diet. And then I discovered Food Cardiff and the amazing work Pearl was doing, and the framework that they were following through sustainable food places, and that was just a really big light bulb moment to seeing how we approach these systems with this whole systems approach. Right, so now I'm the Sustainable Food Coordinator for Blaenau Gwent Food Partnership. Errol's already spoke really well about how that's a PSB supported programme of work. And I'm housed by the Teichholm Housing Association, and the anchor institutions on our steering group are sort of the integral and vital for this work to be done, because they're committed to this place-based approach and this long-term way to see things improving throughout our food system. So I love this sort of little sculpture. Every week I read a report about all these recommendations and how this is going to fix our food system, and it's all sitting on a shelf, and it can be quite frustrating that this isn't happening fast enough for me. I want systems approach, but I want it quite quick. So one way to sort of scratch that itch is the community-based approach. This quick and effective thing you can do at the grassroots level, where you can sort of speak to your network, find out what they're doing, and then go about changing the immediate things that they're experiencing. And that's one big part of my role, is sort of accessing funding for them and helping them maximize that funding and facilitating better use, and really getting some quick and effective action out into the community. A couple of examples to whiz through. Llanhilleth Miners Institute, they're doing some incredible work. They got funded through the Inland Revenue and Visitor Health Board, as well as some additional funding to put a food hub coordinator in post. And with Angie, I've been able to work with her and look at what we can do. So we've got a slow food club going on, and we've increased their fruit and veg provisions for their service users. There's a picture of Ava there. Just like as soon as she got the slow cooker, she was like preparing a meal for the whole family. It's just great to see those things. Just like we had this discussion in 1 week, and then like a month later, Ava was cooking a meal for her family, which was really nice, quick turnaround to see. And being part of the network, we can sort of disseminate information. So with the Healthy Start, the digital rollout, the teething problems we were experiencing of that, I was able to go and speak to Angie, and then all of a sudden this sort of key leadership issue on how we can sort of help people was getting out to her 150 service users who are most likely going to benefit from that information. And we spoke earlier about the sort of that a lot of the work being done. It's I'm speaking to community food organisations, and they're all food leaders as well, and they're doing like a really hard job. It's like a relentless position to be in. They're like it's crisis management day to day. They're hearing heartbreaking stories from people. And it's sort of trying to think about, especially in Blaenau Gwent, as Errol's talked about earlier, we've got this sort of, everyone's fixated on providing this hunger safety net, which is incredibly important. But we also need to sort of take a step back and take a breath and look about how we can provide a sort of nutritional safety net as well. And Cafe Teleria are doing a really good thing through funded project as well, where they've developed like a hyper-local community Meals on Wheels service delivered by their e-bike. So that'll be providing sort of like a 5-a-day meal for those in need, which is just shows that we can be ambitious and we can sort of see the changes that we want to meet the goals we're after. Yeah, so I was part of the My Food Community program, which was a really inspiring piece of program to be part of. Similar to my degree, really, we're talking about these fascinating subjects, given the time to explore them, whether that's sort of 3 Horizon Futuring or sort of food ethics or systems change. And it's just this place to sort of share best practice, be inspired by other groups, and just seeing that there's so much activity going around the UK. It's just really empowering and inspiring to see. What's the next slide? Oh yeah, so one example of that. So one workshop delivered by Foodwise Leeds. They've rolled out these little veg libraries, and I thought this was an incredible idea. So I went around the community groups I've been working with and said, oh, we can do this. It'll be easy. So now this is rolled out in Blaenau, Gwent, and we've got sort of 10 coming over the summer. It just shows that sort of we can take inspiration from elsewhere and sort of see it enacted in your place. So the whole point of My Food Community is to do a community action project. And sort of one thing I struggle with is sort of this sort of communication and framing. And there's some really good workshops delivered by Food Ethics Council and the Soil Association about how we can sort of become food citizens. How do we frame that conversation? What language do we use? And that just sort of got me thinking about working with kids and engaging with a local creative arts company. So together we're going to be running a food waste project during the Food and Fun School Holiday Enrichment Programme. So we'll be delivering 6 workshops over the summer, and the kids are going to be creating their food waste superhero. And then there's going to be sort of food waste projects, sort of stations that they'll be visiting. I've been giving out the information on sort of the sort of importance of food waste, and the arts company are going to be sort of designing the superhero, creating the costume, the name, and then they're going to turn that into an animation, which the kids are going to be part of. And that's sort of going to be shown then to assemblies, and we'll be spreading that message throughout the schools. And just to sort of highlight how sort of these things can snowball, or how ambitious you can be. So talking to the school's catering manager, she's really taken by this because one of her problems is getting the kids to recycle food waste. So she's on board to get it shown all around the schools. And then the Tasty Careers, the STEM, linking food to the STEM curriculum. They're keen for me to work on a food waste project with the secondary schools and local businesses to sort of tie it all in together. So this sort of seemingly like quite light idea to get some food citizenship engagement has sort of progressed and snowballed, and it's been a really really encouraging thing to see developed. And is that the end? Yes, diolch. And are we doing the video? Oh, I have the power. Still got the power.
I'd just started in the role of food poverty coordinator, and I saw an opportunity to bring together different people in the food world into this sort of like training, learning, development space. So when I found out about the programme, I reached out to other people that were in the community to try and see if we could get a network of people that were local to our area involved.
As being a nutritionist, I was naturally drawn to this programme, and it came at a really good time for me because of the work that I was doing in Bury. It fitted in perfect. It was perfect timing actually.
We have something called Food Share, which sits slightly above emergency food provision as in food bank, and it is taking short-dated supermarket stock and giving it out to the community, again to the families that are dropping into poverty and to our older generations, and it's just used as a doorstep, not a chance to get to know people. So the idea of taking this and expanding that through a My Food community just seemed like the perfect transition. So it was absolutely the right thing for us to do at Calder Community Cares.
I'm quite new to my role in my community, and it was just a really nice chance to be able to start to connect with other people, not just UK-wide, but also some of my neighbouring projects in South Wales, which was really important to me.
So I'd done some work with Food for Life already. We'd been part of a giveaway where we grew loads of vegetables and gave them away to people in lockdown when they were locked into their houses. And through that, we met some other organisations, and the idea that we could be part of a bigger network and connect with other people across the country that were also doing food growing.
To broaden my horizons, to give me some sort of substance behind what I was doing. I'm not a food education trained teacher in a primary school, and I think it was to learn and develop myself as a person in leadership skills. That was something else that motivated me to become part of it.
I think it was to keep connected. I think because I've been very localised, our area is kind of disconnected with food and good food as well. And with us now being certified organic, I was kind of keen to really stay on that kind of movement of good food. So it was me bringing national awareness more onto a local level. That's what encouraged me. And from a personal level, I wanted to be around people who were like-minded people, who were thinking the same and had a shared vision and a kind of shared goal. So from a personal perspective during lockdown, it really helped me stay focused.
Some great examples there of how people have changed their attitudes to food, from being a chef to wanting to learn more to thinking about how do I instill some of these better food values into communities and into people, and making that jump is hard sometimes. But we've got chefs in the room, we've got growers, we've got policy advisors, policy makers, and we've got third sector organisations. So joining all of that lot up has that ability to have a real impact. I'm going to ask
Gary, before you
Chandra,
ask the question.
No, I was
you're on it. So yeah, don't worry.
I'm on it. Linking on to Chris's presentation around almost starting that life through the My Food communities support and project. Chandra, we're going to ask you, Ashley, I might ask you to come and join the panel as well, but yeah, come down. And we're giving Chandra a few minutes to sort of inform and impart some information around what My Food Communities is about, what it's still able to do, etc., etc. So over to you, Chandra.
Oh, thanks. So, wasn't expecting this. So I think Chris and Louise have done an amazing job of explaining what My Food Community is and what we set out to do. And it was a pilot programme last year, so there were our guinea pigs, and they've offered us the most valuable constructive feedback to roll it out again. So we're in the throes of recruitment right now. We've got 100 places available, and recruitment and applications are open till the 18th of July. And we've tweaked the programme, so it will be 6 months, not 9 months. You'll be glad to know. And we've endeavoured to create a learning space that's more around peer networking and your own personal development and journey around how to galvanise a food movement where you are, from your own leadership techniques and styles. So we're working with a partner called Choreo, who will be delivering leadership masterclasses, and then we bring in partners like Sustain and the Food Ethics Council to deliver inspirational workshops that you take part in, to take conversations to your communities, like things like food citizenship, and the nature and climate emergency, and how to have those conversations at a level that's meaningful to you and your community as well. And we don't just leave you to it. We will then offer you a grant to then apply your learning in a project or a campaign, or to amplify something that you're already doing. And then we will support you through that facilitation of that grant and what that might look like for you as well. So we would welcome many applications from Wales, and Hannah will be on hand to support you as well. The application's really easy. It's only 3 questions, and you can even submit an audio file if you can't be bothered typing. Just give us a heads up if it's in Welsh, and then we can get that translated. So, yeah, please do apply and join our network. And, of course, Chris and Louise will be staying on as part of the alumni, so they will be here to support you through the network as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chandra, and sorry to put you on the spot a little bit there, but I think it's worthwhile you staying there just in case there's any specific questions directed to you. I'm guilty of running a bit late, sorry. Tough. Does delay lunch very slightly, and that's bad, but bear with us. I do want to make this a bit interactive, so looking for questions. We might have to run a mic around or two. We've covered quite a lot. Amber, you've got your hand up first. Feel free to ask in Welsh. We can give some translation, audio things to the panel if required. I don't want you not to feel you can't communicate in Welsh. Not putting any pressure on you, Amber, but carry on.
Wel, dwi'n gallu siarad yn Cymraeg, ond dwi'n mynd i wneud yn Saesneg. Okay, I was just wondering with the Accessible Veg Project, Abel and Angelina, what are the next steps with that? And because I know a lot of people have been doing a lot of innovation around hot food being made from vegetables, going into different communities. I was just wondering if you had any plans, next steps, because you know it maybe didn't come across that it was that successful in a way.
So actually, I also wanted to invite my colleague Caroline if you'd like to come up. So Caroline was my partner in crime in terms of executing the research on the project. So next steps. One thing is, so the workshop, and it was hard, 5 minutes to try and run through everything, and there's so many things I left out, but the workshop that we ran in March with the 4 farms that we had worked with, that was actually a really positive experience, I think, because what we saw coming out of that, so 2 farms had implemented a plan. A 3rd farm, from the start working with them, they were really keen to implement a solidarity model. However, they were saying, I don't think we can do this with our membership base. Like, they don't have deep pockets. I don't see how we're going to generate additional funds to support boxes for food insecure households. And they kind of maintained that line throughout the project. We got to this workshop, everyone talked about the different CSA partners talked about their experiences. By the time we'd gotten to the end of this 2-hour workshop, that farm was saying, well, actually, yeah, we can do this. You guys are doing this. We can totally do this. And so I think he walked away feeling really inspired and realizing it may not be that difficult, and even if it's just a few veg bags that they're able to support, that they could actually do that. So what we wanted to do, and from our original idea, is to try and hold additional workshops, build a community of practice across CSA farms to try and spread innovation and ideas. I've also been trying to think, so the 2 farms where it didn't work, trying to think what are other models that might lead to successful outcomes. So we see that this partnership model, partnering up with a local food aid charity, works really, really well. But I'm sure that's not the only way to do it. And so it's just kind of sitting down, putting our heads together and thinking, well, what are other ways of working that we could get to a more successful outcome there? So work in progress. I don't know if you want to add anything, Caroline?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was great to see which bits worked and which didn't, and then sort of learning from those sort of potential levers to sort of how we can scale this up to a nationwide level and what we can learn from it. So I think those would be some next steps, but it has to come from these like small initiatives, and that's why it's so great to be doing this collaborative research on the ground with grassroots initiatives to then help from an academic perspective to sort of put the evidence forward, see what works, what doesn't work, and then see where we can go from there.
Great, thank you. There's always a risk giving an academic a microphone as well, isn't there? I've got 2 questions here. I'm going to come to you after David. Callum, let's take your one if there's a microphone to hand over. Sorry, David, I'm going to take you second. Sorry.
Hi there, Callum from the National SFP team. Part of my role is to think about research and evaluation across the network. And when you talk to coordinators, they have this real understanding that creating this rigorous evidence base is really important. And engaging with academic evaluation is an important part of that. But you also increasingly hear from these coordinators that there is a real barrier to engaging with academic research because of a feeling of misalignment with objectives, a feeling sometimes that the time schedules that don't line up and the pressures that academics are under. And there's actually now an increasing sort of resistance of some parts of our network to engaging with academia. And what's great to see in the case of the project that you've introduced to us is this really great sort of symbiotic relationship that's developed between research and real practical work. I wondered if you could just briefly speak a little bit to how that relationship developed, and maybe some of the sort of the challenges and opportunities, Angela, that you found as an academic, and Abel, that you found as a practitioner.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Actually, I like to think of it as a new way forward in terms of, because we've been talking about partnerships, and it is exactly that, partnership building. And I think this project was able to be implemented so quickly and so well, I think, because of the partnerships that I had through the Food Policy Alliance, Cymru, I've worked for several years with Gary, with Katie, and with others, and so I said to them, look, I've got this idea, I'd like to do this, and actually Katie said, you know, actually this aligns perfectly with our P's Please objectives, we could put some funding into that, and Gary and Katie both sent it out through their networks, I think mainly Gary, and very quickly, within a week, I had farms coming forward saying, yeah, actually, you know, the pandemic, we've seen increasing food insecurity in our communities. We want to do something about that. Our veg should be available for everybody. We'd like to work together on this. So it was having that firm foundation of the relationships with partners already in place that enabled the activation of the idea. And this is a way that I've always worked, and I'm a people person. I enjoy working with people and building these partnerships, and I think the benefit of it as well is that I hear the needs from those on the ground doing the work and, you know, the frustrations they have, and I think, well, I could do some research on that. I can throw together this project, and this one didn't actually take that much money to do, and it was just, I think, the partnerships in place.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of see my role as a leader of a CSA as a communication role, as a way to engage people with these models. So the prospect of lending academic research to what we were saying already or kind of thinking already was really attractive. And yeah, to give that clout, because I really, you know, I wholeheartedly believe in the CSA model, and it's amazing to see research happening that's elevating that model as a model not just for local food distribution, but for food insecurity as well, and for dealing with some of the issues that we're facing. So on that note, it was a joy to be contacted, and we've really benefited from our part in the networks of Food Sense Wales and Social Farms and Gardens, and I certainly feel really supported by these institutions that are kind of trying to elevate projects like us, that are giving us a voice, which is something that wasn't happening a few years ago when I first started. So yeah, I think that there were challenges for us. I mean, my co-director Steph, who dealt with a lot of the daily work around the Accessible Veg Project, I think he experienced a lot of just, you know, all the chasing up and the administration and the, you know, finding, you know, unused veg boxes on a doorstep after a week, you know, just these kind of things that are just, yeah, a little challenging, but I think by and large it was great, and it was really nice to read the report in the end and see the outcomes.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point, and I'll just add a little bit of, not background, but from our members' point of view, we definitely get that challenge over when we're looking for feedback from them, and as we've got academic researchers here, but a lot of our funded projects involve our own researchers, and we've got private researchers here. But what often happens is funding finishes at the same time. In Wales, big chunks of money come out at the same time, finishes at the same time. Everyone's getting asked to evaluate, to feedback at the same time. And it's quite draining at times. You get multiple requests, you have to try and prioritise. And what we really try and advocate for is building that partnership, so it's not just I'm coming in, I'm parachuting in from above, I want to extract from you and I'm going to take it away and I'm going to write it in a nice shiny glossy report. It has to work as a partnership. And in our case, and many others, we advocate that there's a reward in there somewhere. So be that financial, be that, what do you get out of it? You have to be really clear about what the people on the ground helping you deliver your research are going to get out of it and what their members are going to get out of it. And I think that's really vital to make sure that all of us understand that when we're going for grants and going for research things and stuff. It's a two-way process, really, and it works well when it's a two-way process. Struggles a bit when it's a bit, I need something from you and I'm going to take it and I'm going to run off with it. So, yeah, thank you. Good point. David, we've got time for one or two more questions. I'm looking at Katie. We can fit in 2 questions. That's fine.
It's not dissimilar to the last question, although that was a better question. Oh, right, okay.
It's a good ploy.
Yeah, it's very good. I don't even know how to put it on, I just twist it. Hello? Oh, well, I'll just shout.
You can shout.
Your voice travels.
Okay, so, and the point again is about evaluations, really. So, I think Gary made the point at the outset that he used to lobby and he gave up. It's a waste of time. And lobbying on its own is really a waste of time. You want to influence policy people, but lobbying that's supported by research and evidence and evaluations can be very effective. So my question really is to Angelina, because to me, the really interesting part of your project will be the longitudinal studies. And when we look at it, you provided a lot of support to households. You gave them the veg, you delivered it to their home, you gave them cooking instructions. And then I may have picked you up wrong, but I think you said 48 households started out, 16 finished. Now, given that, if we want to scale this up, we would never be able to provide that level of support on an ongoing basis to households. So, you know, we need to understand that better, don't we?
So I'll start it, but I'm sure Caroline's also got something to add. So we started out with 48 households. I should clarify, the 16 households, we finished with roughly 40-something households, but we were only able to do the interview follow-up with about 16. And one of the feedbacks that we had, timing is difficult because we were looking to do those follow-up interviews the end of November, start of December. So you had the Christmas period starting, and that was a period of heightened anxiety and depression for a lot of our participants, on top of just what all of us experience at the start of December. It's just like everything is thrown at you, everybody wanting things to happen before those Christmas holidays. So that was a little bit of the issue that we had. So like I said, 2 of our partners who had those strong partnerships in place with the food security partner, they didn't have turnover over the season. They had the same households who started, finished with them. Our one partner who did not have a food aid charity partner to work with, it was constant turnover. We didn't have anyone who started with us, finish with us. And then the other partner who had kind of a weak relationship, it was a difficult, and there was turnover there. So in terms of scaling up, though, do you want to take that part?
Yeah, so I think, we keep coming back to this point. It's all about the relationships that are built. And as academics, we are weird people to talk to people who we might want to be interviewing, and we don't have the connections with them, and we don't need to, because this is a collaborative effort, right? So we need the food aid charities that we had our collaboration with. Again, it's about the community, it's about the relationships that helped us immensely with this project. So we couldn't carry out some of the field work, essentially. And I think that's a big learning point from this project as well, that we really do need these relationships, and we need to build them into the evaluation. And it's not just academics coming in saying, like, okay, now let's evaluate, because that's not going to work. It's not going to work for scaling up either. So.
Thank you. Okay, we've got no time, but we'll take one more question. If there is one. But there's no pressure.
I'm pitching things up by asking a question.
Well done, Phil.
Hey everyone, I'm Pearl from Detail. I've written off
there was a lot of valid discussion around what do you tackle first, cost of living, climate, health, particularly around the kind of food poverty angle or poverty in general. And I think it's quite interesting that you've got the conflict between these. And one of the things we've seen in Cardiff, and can't generalise because people have different experiences, but we've done a lot of co-design, and I think there's a big gap between access and reality, but there's not necessarily as big a gap between people's values. So if people were given the choice of buying healthy, sustainable food, they would take it. And I was thinking, that made me think about when you were talking, Angelina and Abel, is that something you found in your study around the kind of values side of things with the food?
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think having more money doesn't seem to translate to spending more money on food. So we're talking a lot about low-income households, but actually the experiences of the accessible veg are quite universal to all financial situations. Actually, I think the statistic now is we spend 12% on average of our household income on food, whereas in the 50s, 60s it was 50%. And I think there are countries where that's still the case, where food is a bit more of a central part of life, a bit more central part of culture. So I think, engagement-wise, for us, the engagement challenges are the same across the board. They're not unique to lower income households. I think that's a really key point. And for it to step away from being a middle class thing, as you mentioned, and just a nice add-on to life. It's trying to put it at the centre of life, trying to put local food in its right place, which is at the centre of life and culture and everything. And I think it speaks to a wider sort of impoverished food landscape in the UK, where we need to address all of the ways we think about food, the ways we value food, because I want to make the point that as farmers, it shouldn't fall on us to make our food cheaper. And that's what it feels like sometimes. It's like we have to reduce the price of our veg to make it accessible. But I think that's really the wrong place to be focusing the energy in. And obviously there are ways, like I talked about, the sliding scale. I think that was the best financial model we could think of to incorporate solidarity and food security into our veg boxes. Without compromising our bottom line. Obviously, we have other ways people can volunteer for veg boxes. We do fundraise for a few free boxes for people who can't come and volunteer or can't find those other ways. But that was the point that came to mind, is that the challenges are universal, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. Good challenging response, which is what today's about. We've got a short session now before lunch, so I'll hand back to Hannah. Is it Hannah or Katie? Thanks to the panellists, thanks for those that posed questions.